Liep, auto ging voor gemeten, strategie vond ik ook helemaal niks. Pitstop was natuurlijk ook helemaal kloten. En de meeste van de race hebben we ook op minder vermogen moeten rijden omdat we een probleem hadden. Dus ja, eigenlijk ging helemaal niks goed. Dus
Following two catastrophic GPs in a row, Red Bull is convinced that Max Verstappen has gotten down on the problem of the RB20 and what needs to be fixed to help the Red Bull team move in a better direction and get them back in championship positions. It's been clear, and especially with the interview we just had in Monza from Max Verstappen, that he's not comfortable with the car and the driving style that Max uses isn't working on this RB20. Now, Max is the best driver currently in our sport, and he proves that even with a weak car, he can put himself up into big positions like his P2 in Zandvoort, and just having consistent performances day in and out, regardless of the position. The team has now fallen back behind Mercedes, Ferrari, and clearly McLaren. But can the team help Max get back in a comfortable position? And why isn't the style working? What's wrong with the RB20? Before getting into the video, wanted to thank you guys for support, the best as usual, and the best comments, always the best feedback. Thank you so much for that. If you're new here, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Helps the channel out. We're growing very fast, and it makes me very happy to make content for you guys. Let's get into this Max Verstappen driving style video. Briefly to start the video, I want to talk about Max's driving style. It's been talked about so much, so I don't want to make this a big segment, but it's a nice way to transition into why his driving style isn't working with the current car. Clearly, Max made the car work like a gem in 22 and 23 through these current regulations. Max even said when the season started that the car wasn't in the optimal window, but it was still working really well through any corner speed. And as the teams caught up, like in Miami, that's where we saw the problems with the Red Bull on the curbs, and now we see the problems even worse in slow speed and medium speed corners. To recognize a driver's driving style, you have to look at slow speed corners. Due to the high speed, there isn't anything a driver can do to be unique. It's typically about saving tires and having as little inputs as possible through those high to medium speed corners. But in the low speed, the drivers make the difference, and your perfect examples are Lewis and Max, because the two of them drive completely differently. Verstappen tends to go quite early on the brakes, but keeps a lot of momentum going slightly shallow into that corner, and he's leaving that rotation to the very last bit to also help out with his exit. The car has to have a very strong front end, and the tires in the front have to be able to take that. Most drivers cannot drive with this type of style. It's very specific. The only drivers that really had this were Michael Schumacher, Nigel Mansell, and Alain Prost. They all drove with this very speedy corner entry, but the exit is still prioritized really well. Now, the way that I'm saying it, it's not as black and white as this. He's very adaptable and he can go into cars with some understeer, but oversteer is the preference for Verstappen and that high corner entry. Tracks like Spa and Zandvoort are actually his bread and butter because of the way that he takes those corners. He's typically the fastest driver there. In Zandvoort, it was clear to see where the problems were with the Red Bull, and Monza just exaggerated these problems even more. As I stated in a couple of previous videos ago, the Red Bull car isn't where it used to be. So now to go on to the problems with the RB20. I've mentioned them briefly in a video, but this is a lot more in depth because now we have much more analysis from Max himself and the Red Bull team. Now, knowing the style that Max uses with that oversteer, the car itself has now inherently gained understeer. It was there in the beginning of the season, but now it's very prominent. Looking at corners in Zandvoort and any of the corners that were high to medium speed in Monza, and even turns 1 and 2, you could see that Max wasn't able to rotate the car at all. It just wasn't getting that front grip, and the rear part of the car wasn't budging. It wasn't giving him that slip that he likes to have, which he controls super well. Max has now insisted that they change the car as a whole because these problems have started from pretty much the beginning of the season, and this isn't necessarily an Adrian Newey designed car. It has a lot to do with Pierre Wash and what he said he wanted into the car. This is their version of an extreme formula car in these regulations. They wanted to be special about it, and it's clearly backfired now going into this part of the season. The clear weaknesses that Max has identified is within that understeer and the car not being able to rotate very well. And yet again, driving styles matter a lot when the balance for the car is there and drivers can be comfortable. You can see that with Perez. When he is a bit comfortable, he's much closer to Max. But when Max is given that oversteery car and he can really show off his speed, that's when he really gains a huge advantage on Perez. As of lately, both in Zandvoort and in Monza, he was only about 0.2 faster than Perez, which is unusual to his comparison of about 5 times faster. And that's because, as Pettis says, he's had these exact same problems for about 8 to 10 races now, while Max is only currently dealing with them.
I really feel like I'm in the same boat as I've been in the last 8-10 races. But now, all of a sudden, Max has come to similar issues.
Now, the way that that's put out, it almost seems like Max was driving a different car, but this is not the case. It's just that Max, with the setup that he was using, he was able to perform much better and extract much more out of the car. Now, the current RB20 is undrivable because the balance is thrown all over the place. It's got understeer, its tires go out very fast because of that understeer, and the corrections that Max has to make makes the car tend to slip out uncontrollably. There's both oversteer and understeer in a bad way. This is pretty much your Ferrari F14. The car has a vicious cycle of just being unbalanced pretty much 24/7. In Monza, this is a big problem because in Sector 2, that car was not able to grip down, and then by the time they got to Parabolica, the car's tires were pretty much gone and you could never take that corner with full confidence. We saw what Kimi did when he took it with full confidence. The RB20 is even worse than the W15. They were about 7/10 off in qualifying, and while there was more pace to be found, the tires by the end of that sector were just way too slow. If you look at the RB19, the car is unstoppable in every corner, but its balance is incredible, especially in the hands of Max. Balance is where a lot of time is gained. It's not just necessarily aerodynamically. Balance matters a lot because if the driver has confidence, which if Max is lacking a little bit, a lot of time is now lost because you can't take those corners as confidently as you usually would. Max's driving style, the inherent one that's given him all these world titles, requires an insane amount of confidence in the car and being able to rely on the front end. But if there is no front end to rely on, which there isn't in the current RB20, it's tough for him to adapt now necessarily, and he can't extract the maximum pace, even though the car just isn't there, even if it did have the balance that he wanted. This now requires Max to go through setups that are different to the previous car, and the experimentation takes a while to actually get this down. But he said that Monza, especially Saturday, highlighted to him what the team has to do differently. Helmut Marko has said that he's recognized these problems, and now the team and engineers are working on how to be competitive again back at Red Bull. So in conclusion, Max Verstappen's problems with the RB20 are the understeer, the tires going out with no front end grip, and confidence taking a big hit because the balance is nowhere near to what it should be in a Formula 1 car driven under Max Verstappen. While I do think they will settle these problems at some point, it seems like 2024 won't have the exact solution they need, and Max is just going to have to make the best out of a car that's very subpar. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you guys think? Do you think I've missed something on Max Verstappen's driving style and the problems that he's having? Love to hear them. Love always talking with you guys and love your input. So please leave a like and a comment and subscribe. It would mean the world. And peace.